It's a new year, so it's time for a new art journal. And yeah, I have a lot of journals going, but every year I break out a new journal just to begin anew. And so I want to show you the process that I go through to initiate a new art journal. But first of all, let's go ahead and look at some of the supplies that I'll be using for this. So this is the one that I'm using, my personal one, and I'll show you my front page of this, but wait till the end. We're going to do our own page here. So this is a 5x8 journal. I have lots of options here. This is another 5x8 mixed media. I also have, this is a 7 7/4 by 9 7/4 mixed media. These are Strathmore. And I love these because they're high quality, but also you can open them up really well. I've got a couple of these because I'm going to have a little buddy of mine that lives with me joining me. And then this is one I haven't tried yet, but this is their watercolor. So it's thicker. This one is 140 pounds. The mixed media is 90 pounds. I found the mixed media great for adding collage, for adding glue, watercolor, for adding marker. I even add acrylic sometimes or acrylic pens to it. So I usually use the mixed media, and that is actually what I'm going to break out today. So I've got my art journal, and now what do I use inside of my art journal? I start on the very first page, and this is why this is a very special page. I like to mark the year as it is, and I have a selection of pens that I use as outlining pens. I have a video that talks about the pens, and it does a challenge to see if they hold watercolor. I will link that here in case you want to see it. So for this one, I'm gonna go with my old standby. What I also have available is I have 2 mason jars of water. For watercolor, I put my brush. I have one that I rinse and then a clean one that I get water from. I also have my little plate that I always keep with me, and it has just some of my favorite brushes with me, easy access. It also has just a little dipping bowl, and everything that I have when I do my creating has a special meaning to me. And that's how I find that I create the best, is when I bring in a lot of the things that mean a lot to me, or a lot of the things that I love, people that are special to me. So for example, this little itty bitty jug that is still, I can't even get it clean anymore, was my mom's, and she's been gone over 15 years. And this is the one that always is on this plate. So that's just one of the things that I have that helps me get into my space, knowing that she's always with me. Another thing that I have with me is my little Tandy. That's the little fox that I draw. My little Tandy inspiration. This little pewter fox was found on a road trip that I took with my family, and I love going to antique stores and secondhand stores, and this is where I found this little fox. And so this little fox is always available for me when I do my creating. I want you to create your space that feels comfortable for you, that feels like it is inviting. As far as supplies that I love, I have my sets of watercolors. I have 4 sets. I have the complexion, I have the Pastel Dream, I have Classics, and I have Woodlands. And I use them all pretty much equally, except for pastels. I don't really pull out my pastels as much. And then I also have some of my acrylic paint pens. I have the skin tones, and then I have the bold colors. And these are great because they're dual tip, so there's a fine and there's a thick one. So we open our page to the very first page. I have my pen to do my outlining, but I also invite you to grab a pencil if that feels more comfortable. Some of my sketching pencils look like this. And in this time, I just try to ground myself. I allow myself to take some deep breaths to focus on my inward feeling. And what I'm creating here is an image that will start my book and allow me to create throughout the whole year. So I'm going to start with a frame. This is the frame where I'm going to put in the year. I'm going to do some accents around it. You might notice that I go into more of a creative space where it gets a little quiet, and I invite you to do the same. Don't worry about if it's even. I'm thinking about this, and I was thinking about the work that I want to bring forward and what would be most comfortable in this journal. The image of the tree house kept coming forward. So my opening page is going to be a tree. I don't even know if my doodle person will make this page, and that's okay because it's the container that will hold all of what you're going to put in it. So when you think about that, think about what image brings you comfort and security and safety to be able to hold what you need to put in your journal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some tree branches to it. I have a big, sturdy trunk coming down from it. Oh, I almost feel like it needs to have a door. Oh, I love this. See, as you create, you might start to really notice exactly what is calling for. And then with a tree, I'm going to add some of the wood marks to it. But I am actually going to add a door. And then down here, I'm going to have just add some texture. So we're going to get the mountains behind here so that I can add some different colors to it. And there we go. There's my outline. And now we'll start coloring. So now I'm going to add some color. And I think the first thing I want to add is the tree. So I'm going to get my watercolors here and start working with the tree color. Wow, such a beautiful color. I love this color green. This is in the classic palette. So much beauty. Just remember, this is your book. So however it turns out is the way it's supposed to turn out. wondering what you chose as your starting page for your new journal. And remember, even though I am doing this at the new year, this is also a process that I do anytime I start a new journal. So this book here, the Strathmore Mixed Media, has 64 pages in it. A lot of times I do double spreads, so I can go through a few of these in a year. And then also I have different journals for different needs or different feelings, maybe different mediums. Some of my ones that I add collage to, I usually don't add with my paint ones, but there's actually no rules because sometimes I do. So I like to make it kind of blotchy because then it looks more like a natural tree. And you can do that by just adding more pigment. So going back, getting a little bit more color and bringing it back down and continuing on. Or you can add a little bit more water, and then that will actually make it flow a little bit differently. And I find that sometimes when it piles, the water actually piles a little bit, it will dry different colors. So I always love to experiment and see what will come up. Oops, look what I did. I went outside of my lines. I guess that's what this year is about, going outside of the lines. But I'm not worried about that because that right there is going to be taking a different color on, and it will just add a little texture to bring the green in. Maybe I'll work with some of my color mixing for that part. But I find with watercolors, there is always a little bit of bleeding, no matter actually how dry I get it. And maybe it's because I do tend to work with more water. I don't know, it just tends to flow a little bit. So this is the base of the tree for my tree house. Going back, and I will probably add some finishing touches with either marker or some acrylic pens. So I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'm going to add a little bit more texture over here. See how that dries up. Okay. And let's go on to something else. I think the next place I'm going to go to is the tree. So for the tree, I have the brown here, but I'm going to start with a base. So I'm going to start with this kind of tannish base that you see on trees, and then I'll be adding a little bit of color to it as I go. So adding the darker parts. So in case you're new here, let me just tell you a little bit about the meaning behind the treehouse. So as a therapist, I had an office that was the second floor, and it was surrounded by trees, and it had many rooms, and it just fondly got referred to as the tree house. I think I might have started it, and that is because I've always been a tree girl. I've always had a love of climbing in trees, being in trees. I broke my arm numerous times as a child climbing trees, and trees are just very meaningful in my life still to this day. And so as the pandemic hit, then I took all of this online, and the treehouse became virtual. And so you're sitting in the treehouse right now. It brings me comfort, and I know it brings all the people who found it comfort, and I hope that you find the same joy and peace as others have. Okay, I'm going to go on to now some of the background colors, and I'm going to do it a little bit out of order. So this is actually one of my most favorite colors. I'm going to add it up here. This is like a blue that comes in the Woodlands color palette. I think my tree is dry enough. I will add it here. This is a watercolor brush. Let me see if I can look it up. It's the Princeton Neptune number 6 round. So I like using watercolor for the ease and actually the quickness with which I can apply color onto my pages. So a lot of times in our day, we might feel like we don't have a lot of time to create or to put something down. And just the experience of allowing the flow to happen through adding some color very quickly feels like it adds so much, and it brings up so much depth. It brings up so much emotion. It helps to connect to the inner space inside, that inner world that we're looking to connect to. So I love that color. Next, I'm going to go to the sign, and I'm going to add some background color for that. For that one, I'm going to pull out my pastels and see which color I'm drawn to. And this is a very organic process for me. So as I'm creating, I'm determining what I need to bring forward. So for this, I'm being drawn to, actually, I keep being drawn to a pink. So that's an interesting choice here. But I'm going to put pink on the sign. And I don't need a lot of it, but just to add some color to show that this is a sign that the new year is upon me, and that I'm inviting new creativity into this journal. I'm inviting all of the colors. I'm not limiting it in just my usual color palette, and just letting it come forward. So the reason that the tree came forward is like my story about, as a child, this was a place that I had a big connection to with trees. So I like to add them whenever I can. And because of that, trees always brought me a lot of safety. They brought me a lot of connection to the earth, brought me connection to myself. I like to think about myself being grounded and rooted like a tree, like having deep roots like a tree. I know sometimes that can be problematic. I know when we had this house, we first purchased this house, there was a huge tree out front that did a bunch of plumbing damage with its roots. So, it came in here and said, I belong, and it did. And it said, I'm part of this house. So that was something that we worked on for a while. So as you can see now, I've got a couple layers here, and I'm going to check and see those are all dry enough that I can go ahead and add this layer. And that layer, I want to add some really bright, vibrant color. I'm going to add this yellow over here. This is again from the Woodlands collection. And look at this yellow. This is such a solid yellow. A lot of my watercolors, they'll just kind of, you know, go into a different shade. This one never seems to. Look at, I pull it down, it's just as vibrant. I love it. So I'm making this all yellow in here. And again, I just tapped into the other one, and that's okay. What it does is when you add a little bit into the other one, I added a little bit over here. I don't know if you can see it, but it added a little bit of shading, which is kind of nice to have that shading going into my branches, into my actual tree. I've got so much water here. Sometimes I make a big pool of watercolor water. Oops. And then I try to go and swap it up. I'm going to go get a little bit more pigment for this side. And this side will be interesting because this is where I added the green up top. So let's see what happens. And we're going to welcome it all, just like we do with all of our feelings. Or just like I try to with all of my feelings. And being able to welcome them, to give them voice, give them space to share. That's what I find in my journals, is I offer the space to be a part of the creativity. There you go, look at that. I love it. As you can see with my images, my doodles, I do very playful and I do very whimsical. And that helps to chime in to a deeper place inside for me too. So I'm not looking to make it look like actual landscape, actual colors that I would see. I'm looking to have it match the color scheme that I feel inside at any given moment. Let's add some color to the door. And this one is calling for an orange door. And I want to tell you that orange to me is creativity. But orange is also the color of my Doodle Girl's shirt. So she is represented here by welcoming everybody with her orange door as you create. I'm going to pull out a smaller brush for the detail around my sign. Wonder how you're doing over there. I can't wait to see. Or maybe you could just let me know. This is a 2. Again, it's part of my Neptune set. I'm going to go ahead and just start with some color here and start to do a little bit of the accents around, skipping. And seeing how it looks to fill in my frame. Okay, I believe she's done and she's ready for 2023. So, this is the one that I'm going to use when we create together. But I promised to show you the one that I am going to work on personally. And when I work on it personally, I work on it with a mentor. I work on it with my own therapist. I work on it with meditation. I work on it just for my own healing. And so because it is a journal, it will be private, but I want to show you my first page. So this is my first page, and I'll bring it to the overhead. I actually added a word to it, and let me show you that. So I added the word integration. And when I started this, I didn't have any of this. When I started the day and I started the process of this, and what happened was I pulled an oracle card and it had an image like this, and what came to me was integration. And I didn't think that was going to be a theme for me this year, but then as I sat with it, it really started to resonate and make sense. I'm integrating my therapist self with my YouTube creating self, my video creating self, my ability to hold groups for people, to be a therapist, to be a mom, to be a partner, to be a human, a meditator, spiritual growth. All of that integration and inner work coming full circle, it all comes around. And it comes forward sometimes as a big glob. And I welcome that. So for 2023, I'm working with integration, and this really resonated from a very deep place inside. And we'll see what comes forward with it. And from here, I bring forward to you. So thank you for being here with me today for creating. We can continue to doodle, to connect for the whole year in the treehouse.